A mostly beautiful day up and down the eastern seaboard. There were a couple of exceptions here and there, but the vast majority of folks enjoyed sunshine. And even down in the south, the humidity was pretty reasonable. And of course, it's been wonderful in the northeast and back over to the Great Lakes and the northern Ohio Valley. And we've got a couple of more days of this before we have to deal with any kind of showers and thunderstorms for the end of the week. But there might be another quick and maybe less robust shot of low humidity coming for Saturday into Sunday. And we'll talk about that. A few interesting things to talk about in the tropics. We'll get to that too. And a little long range, all on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is, as always, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Drive the truck up for mulch, topsoil, sand, and anything else you need to make your home look great or your business look great. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. I know some of you have. And you can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. And if you use the referral link and make a purchase of either the Tempest Weather Station or any of the other wonderful products that they have, both electronic and in the latest in weather fashion, use the coupon code I want a weather station and you will get
10%. 10, Joe. 10. 10 mints and run. No, 10% off anything that you get from Tempest.
That's right. Two mints and one is if you want a thing of certs. Which I don't, they're still around, certs.
Well, two mints and one?
Yeah.
I haven't seen certs advertised in a long time, but I'm assuming that yes, they may very well still be out there.
Yes. I always like the ones with the cinnamon on it.
Yeah.
Those were always good. So anyway, here we are, a Monday, the last day of July, in what is an, I guess a little bit, maybe if this were later August or late August, early September, it wouldn't be unusual, but it is a little bit unusual to string 4 days in a row of low humidity right in the what is the peak of the summer season in terms of the average temperatures.
The entire month of July, save for the last couple of days, has been just one big sauna bath. And it really has not been very nice to be out most of the time. But we're now moving into August tomorrow. And it looks like we've got at least a couple of nice days to look forward to. And as you said, Joe, after another weather front passes on by, maybe, just maybe, some nice weather for the first weekend of August coming up.
Yeah. We have I saw what we have two full moons this month.
Well, not this month, the new month, August.
August, yeah, for August. We have two full moons.
It drives me crazy. I saw Nora O'Donnell tonight headlining this rare
6 billion people will experience Can you imagine the written headline, though, Joe? 6 billion people, or however many people we are now on this lovely planet we call Earth, will see 2 full moons. Something that hasn't happened since...
It happens about once every 3 years.
Yeah, okay, exactly.
Since when is something that happens once every 3 years considered rare? And it's not even a supermoon. I mean, to me, if you're going to call it a supermoon, call it the moon, which reaches perigee at the same time that the moon is full. But now they have widened the definition so that if it's within 90% the perigee distance, then not only do you have one moon qualifying as a supermoon, but in some years you could have as many as 5 full moons. So where do you get off calling something that happens maybe as many as 5 times a year rare? Or even if it only happens once every 3 years. Rare. To me, rare is something that takes place once every, 15, 20, 30 years, once in a generation. But this is the fixation now that the news media has on the word rare. Everything is rare. Everything.
My steak was rare.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I like to have it medium rare.
Well,
But the thing is that I'm at a loss for words now to be able to, you know, the
it's
way they.
it's it's all part of the apocalypse, Joe. It's all part of the apocalypse. Everything is the apocalypse.
I
Whatever
guess.
it is. It's all about trying to make things sound as cataclysmic and as apocalyptic as you possibly can. Speaking of apocalyptic, David Schwartz informs us on the chat board that they stopped making certs in 2018.
Well,
I'm devastated. I'm so devastated that you know what? We're not going to be able to do the show tomorrow night. So so actually, there will, just to let everybody know, there won't be a show tomorrow night because Joe has a talk, which would have pushed the show back to 8:30, and I just figured since there's not much going on at the moment, this is a good time for Joe and I to take an extra day off. So. Which we like to do from time to time. Trish Sparaccio hitting the super chat tip jar tonight. Thank you, Trish, and welcome to everybody on the chat board to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. And for those of you, also big welcome to those of you who are lurking in the background. We're on Monday through Thursdays, except for the exception that I just made for tomorrow. We won't be on, but usually we're on Monday through Thursdays at 7:35 and Sundays at 11 a.m. And make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, as many of you have. Turn your notifications on, and you won't miss it. So my high today was 84, and I think the low was 62. And my dew point, I last checked, it was 82 out. It was 80 outside, and the dew point had dropped down to 63. It's actually, I'll say, I said this yesterday. I'll say it again. The whole Yesterday's dew points here were in the upper 60s with temperatures in the low to mid 80s. I did not feel uncomfortable. It's a different quality of air up here in the mountains. It really is.
Well, I mean, if you get used to it after a while, and if it's not overly oppressive, you can put up with it. Unfortunately, I think the majority of the days in July up here saw dew points at or above 70, which was absurd. In fact, there were a few days where we had dew points, Joe, as high as like 75 or 77. Crazy, crazy. And it was I was at Citi Field with my sister yesterday afternoon. Would you believe I actually said midway through the game, I said, boy, I should have brought a sweater or a light jacket. We had low humidity, temperatures no higher than 77 or 78, but the breeze was blowing at speeds sometimes upwards to 20 or even 25 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And it was a cool, refreshing breeze. It was delightful yesterday.
Yeah, you get a little, little bit of a wind off Long Island Sound over there.
Or Flushing Bay.
Or Flushing Bay.
Yeah.
Hopefully not at low tide.
Yeah. And for a couple of people who emailed me or messaged me, no, the Whitestone Bridge was okay this time. There was some traffic going and coming, but I learned yesterday, for years I used to park in the marina, not in the parking lot, but in the marina. And recently, the last time I parked in the marina, at the end of the game, they were ferrying everybody onto the Grand Central Parkway to the west toward LaGuardia Airport. And I did not want to go in that direction. I had to get to LaGuardia, then turn around and come back east on the Grand Central in order to make my way back to wherever I was going. I was dropping my sister off in the Bronx, and then later I headed back up to the Hudson Valley. But I learned yesterday that if you're going to park in the main parking lot at Citi Field. Because when you do that, and if you leave before the game ends, you can have access to any road you want. And I had access to the Whitestone Expressway and got onto the Whitestone Bridge and headed out and away, and that was it.
All right, well, good to know for those who will be attending Met games as we head into the home stretch of the baseball season.
Not sure. Tom Contino, why are you asking this question? Not sure why Joe Rayo doesn't park in Corona, Queens, just past the Holiday Inn. All right, if I park there, Tom, how do I get to Citi Field? Do I walk to Citi Field from there? Do I take the 7 line? Do I take a bus? What is that, to take a shuttle bus to go from the parking lot?
You could hitch.
Forget it.
You could hitch.
Bad enough I have to pay $40 to park the car. Oh, yeah. Tom Contino. Yes, Joe, it's a half-mile walk. I don't feel like walking a half mile. And where am I going to park? Do I park for free? I mean, at least when I park in the parking lot, I know that at least there's some security, some safety. I don't want to park on a street in Corona, Queens. Crazy.
Well,
anyway.
There you have it. Welcome tonight to all our viewers from Corona, Queens. We hope your neighborhood is safe.
William Huber says, take a cab. I'll take an Uber next time.
Take an Uber. All right. Checking out the surface map. We actually have a cold front that's about to move through, but it's one of these fronts, Joe, you're going from dry air to drier air. And actually, the air behind this front is a shade cooler than the air ahead of it, but there's no real energy in the atmosphere when you're working on dry air going to drier air. There's not really a whole lot of support for showers and storms. There were actually some this afternoon in parts of southern New York and in the upper Hudson Valley, and scattered around, and also even in parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. But as the front sinks southward, there's just nothing. There's no mechanism really to create any kind of thunderstorm activity. So it will come through, and the winds will slightly adjust as it goes by, and that'll lower, give the dew points another nudge down.
That'll be lovely. Keep pushing them down. I love those dew points going down after what we went through in July. It'd be wonderful if we had a finish to the second half of summer is coming up. I think at the end of the week here, August 4th or 5th or whatever. It'd be nice. The second half of the week, second half of the summer, had low dew point temperatures.
Well, keep hoping for that trough in the east, and we'll continue to get these shots. In fact, the old cold front is now pushed down, and the boundary is analyzed down in southern Georgia, cutting across Alabama and Mississippi. So, I mean, the dew points down in western parts of North Carolina are in the upper 50s, and that's reaching down. The temperature's forecast to drop down to below 60 tonight here. So that's a good thing. And the real tropical air is south of that frontal boundary down in Florida, where you would expect it to be, and across the Gulf states. And, another brutally hot day in Texas. Looking at some numbers here, Joe, a lot of spots over 100 degrees this afternoon, at least as of 5 o'clock Eastern time, and also extending up into Oklahoma and into southern Kansas, but then jump on the other side. And the temperatures take a noticeable drop into the middle and upper 80s, and then go a little further north up into Nebraska, and you're looking at mid 70s to low 80s there. And it's all pretty pleasant relatively pleasant around the Great Lakes and across the Ohio Valley, with temperatures in the upper 70s and low 80s, dew points in the mid to upper 50s. So looking good. And on the other side of this front, I see dew points down. Southeastern Canada, the dew points are all down in the 40s, and temperatures that didn't really get out of the low 60s today, and for some places it didn't even get out of the 50s. So that's a pretty decent cool shot. While out in the west, we're seeing it's less than 110 in Phoenix right at 5 o'clock this afternoon Eastern time, so that's 2 o'clock. Why don't we just, for laughs, take a look? First off, there's no excessive heat warnings up for the first time in the Southwest. There are excessive heat warnings I may have used the wrong verb there. There are excessive heat warnings up across much of north central and east Texas into all of just about all of Louisiana and into Mississippi. But I'm going to check. Let's check Phoenix just for laughs, because they've gotten above 110 for a high every day this month, and
Good.
it's 106. It's 106. They're forecasting the chance for some showers there this afternoon.
The monsoons are getting ready to kick in.
Yes. Just for laughs, I want to see what the temperatures have been today so far. So we'll pull up the time series viewer. Oh, I don't want this. Okay, hold on. I guess this is good enough. 104, 102. No, it hasn't gotten 110 today. They may break their streak. Oh my God, they'll have to rewrite the headlines.
You know, you come so close, and it's like a perfect game in baseball. And you get the first 26 outs, and then the final batter gets a base hit.
After on an 0-2 pitch.
Exactly.
On an 0-2 pitch.
Well, let's see. Right now, it's 3 hours. They're 3 hours behind us, so it actually is 4:50. So now they may not do it, Joe, because they're already at the peak of the heating part of the day. So
yeah, well, there's no clouds there now, at least not yet. I'm looking at the satellite loop. There are thunderstorms in northern Arizona. You can see a lot of lightning strikes there, and also in southeast Arizona, extending up into parts of Utah and then pushing up also into Wyoming. As you said, yes, the monsoon is getting underway, and looks like a little bit of smoke coming down over the Great Lakes. As I'm looking, I could see that milky white that's moving southeastward. That's not cloud cover, but it's not into the east yet. And we do have a fairly nice, mainly clear sky. There are clouds up in New England, but most of the area, especially from southern New England and southeastern New York southward, down into southern Georgia and Alabama, more the clear skies than anything else. A lot of clouds over Florida with some scattered. You see the lightning strikes there going on this evening. And as we check out the radar, we've got some scattered showers. Actually, it looks like a shower is about to clip eastern Long Island, as part of that upper trough and that weak cold front coming through. Scattered showers up in interior New England, a few scattered showers in upstate New York, also in northern Pennsylvania, but and also in Maine, now approaching the coastline there. But for the most part, it's fairly quiet. Some scattered showers and storms in southeast Virginia and into North Carolina, and maybe down by Myrtle Beach as well. Looks like a thunderstorm rolling through there. A little busier on the east coast of Florida, where we have some heavy downpours from, I would say, Daytona Beach all the way down to just north of Miami. A little bit of activity in southwest Louisiana with some heavier thunderstorms there. And you can see actually rather active on the radar in the northern half of Arizona. There's quite a few thunderstorms there, and a flash flood warning has been posted up there in the northwest corner. A few showers in parts of Southern California, even around LA. Looks like a couple of radar echoes there aloft, and some heavier storms in Colorado and Wyoming. And it's nice because we're thunderstorm free through Wednesday.
it's that's another facet of the high level of humidity, and we've had periods over July where we've had 2 or 3 thunderstorm threats, severe thunderstorm threats over a span of, let's say, 5 or 6 days. Of course, the most recent one was last Saturday, I believe, and it's been nice ever since. And it'll be nice to go through a period here where we don't have to worry about any such thing for a while. It certainly has been. We've had more than our fair share of wetness this month of July.
By the way, Chuck Cardillo says he spoke to his cousin Angelo, who lives in Phoenix, and he says it's a little muggy there today. So they're 102. This is Scottsdale. I'm sorry, Scottsdale's 102, but the the humidity is at 26%. The dew point's at 61, so it's a little highish. for we've been seeing the dew points, relatively low. Phoenix is, as we said, was 106. Their dew point is 60. So yeah, I guess that must feel a little bit muggy to the
Oh God,
folks to
yes.
the folks in Arizona.
If you're used to the conditions in Arizona, especially southern Arizona, where dew points rarely in the summertime rarely ever get much above 50, and they're usually in the 40s. And you see some ridiculous dew point levels where the relative humidity is like 8% or whatever. 60 degrees for a dew point with temperatures over 100 degrees. I would say that's more than just a little muggy. If you're used to that so-called dry heat. Well, it gets hot, but it's a dry heat. This definitely is not a dry heat if you live out there.
Izzy D hit super chat. Thanks for banging the tip jar, Izzy. Izzy. Thanks for banging the tip jar, Izzy. Okay, for the first time in quite a while, there are no severe thunderstorm watches. Usually, there's a bunch of them up when we're on the air, but tonight's relatively quiet. A lot of areas of marginal risk showing up in the coastal mid-Atlantic and southeast from southeast Virginia southward to Florida, in and around Louisiana and East Texas. Also, a marginal risk in central Missouri down into northern Arkansas, although it looks like most of those echoes are now to the east of that marginal risk zone. And from northeast Colorado all the way up into North Dakota, we've got a marginal risk there, and a marginal risk in most of southern Arizona. But no severe thunderstorm watches are posted, and I don't see anything in the mesoscale discussions that says that they're going to be putting one up anytime soon. Now, tomorrow we have a slight risk up in North Dakota and northwest Minnesota, a marginal risk across the Central Plains into the state of Missouri, and a marginal risk from North Carolina down to northeast Florida. Otherwise, you'll notice no thunderstorms are forecast from Maine uh, down southwestward to Georgia and most of Alabama. Uh, no thunderstorms forecast for tomorrow. So that's a rare sight. And the
That is.
tornado risk tomorrow is less than 2%, so the storm risk is going to be more from wind and hail than anything else. And then on Wednesday, we have a marginal risk across from central Minnesota, northern half of Wisconsin, and northern Michigan, including all of the upper peninsula. But once again, uh, nothing from Maine right down the coast into South Carolina, and that's that core of the dry air mass will be overhead Tuesday night and on Wednesday in the northeast and mid-Atlantic states.
Yep, it's going to be an unusual spell, and I think we certainly paid the price for it through much of July to have a few days where the dew points are down and where the risk of thunderstorms is nil for much of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. That's going to be quite nice.
WPC rainfall amounts a half to three-quarters of an inch in the northeast and mid-Atlantic. A few pockets where the rainfall amounts are a bit higher, particularly in the southeast, where we've got patches of an inch and a half plus. And as always, when we look at these maps here in the summertime, because a lot of this is convective, it's always possible that somebody in some local areas could wind up with double what is forecast. Heavier amounts from western Kentucky westward into the eastern half of Missouri. Also, heavy rain amounts of up to a few inches in the northeastern quarter of Colorado, northwest Kansas, and southeast Nebraska, across northern Wyoming, much of south and North Dakota, seeing potential for an inch and a half or more of rain coming up in the next 7 days. So let's look at the upper air, and you can see the deep trough that's in the eastern part of the United States, and we can draw the flow here. The base of the westerlies goes all the way down. Actually, it goes further south than where I drew the arrow. It goes down to northern Florida. The Atlantic Ridge is rather weak and offshore, and of course we're getting our air straight down from Canada, which this summer has meant that we have to watch for smoke. The big heat ridge is centered over Texas and Oklahoma, which explains the 100-degree plus temperatures there that extend up into Kansas, and also some very hot temperatures into Colorado as well, and New Mexico. So that's where it is at the moment. And as we move along, we're going to see that eastern trough lift out, only to be replaced by another weaker trough that's coming down from Labrador. And you see the short wave here. This is for Friday. It's not a half bad looking short wave that'll be swinging through and probably bringing the risk for some showers and thunderstorms maybe as early as late Thursday. And we'll probably have to wait until late Friday for the upper trough to pass. So there might still be some storm risk on Friday. And then after that, it pulls out, leaving us with this time it's going to be a quick shot of dry air. The jet does not get all the way down with this trough. This next trough for the end of the week lifts up fairly quickly. So we go to a westerly flow aloft, which means that the dry air is only going to get so far south before it shuts off. And it probably reaches maybe as far south as Maryland and Delaware, southern New Jersey. That might be the southern edge of this next shot of dry air. And you see troughing that develops early next week, right in the middle, which means we go to a more of a southwest flow. So I'm thinking, Joe, that next week will be warmer and more humid, and there'll be opportunities for showers and storms until such time as an upper trough can get through. And this one looks like it wants to take all week. Doesn't even get through it. It just makes it to the Great Lakes, and then it just starts to weaken. Kind of interesting a bit toward the end of the forecast period. We do have the ridge in the Atlantic trying to get a little stronger to some extent. And, while this run doesn't exactly show troughing in the east, it's kind of squashed there. But I want to just look at the other run because I know the 18Z run can be a little squirrely sometimes with wanting to change the upper pattern while the main runs don't.
You may want to make a comparison, and I know that it means nothing. Really, it means nothing. But you may want to make a comparison between the 12Z GFS run at 384 hours compared to the same time frame 6 hours later, the 18Z.
Well, you're right, because you got the hurricane to Charleston on the GFS.
Right.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to show in a minute about this, but excuse me. But here's the 12Z, and then we go to the 18Z, and of course the 18Z doesn't show anything along the East Coast. In fact, the 18Z, what it does is it actually develops a system, but it's offshore and just takes it, way out to the east. So, but this is what the models are going to do. I'm kind of interested in, I'm going to bring up the European ensembles because they've been doing this for a couple of runs, and I just want to show everybody what the European ensembles are indicating. So if we look at the European ensembles, it's still, and I'll just
Mrs. Ensembles.
Right, Mrs. Ensembles. She's been on vacation for a while. We haven't had her on the show, but she's back today. The European, interestingly enough, is a little different. The European wants to re-strengthen this trough in the east later next week. And you see it there, all that blue that develops over the Great Lakes and into the northeast and even down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. And that troughing just that weakness sort of stays there in between the east-west Atlantic ridge and the ridging that's in the southwest. There's kind of a hole in between. Now, if we look at, I'm going to bring up the mean sea level pressure here, Joe, because it was kind of interesting. It's a little hard to see, and it's been doing this now because Bill Goodman's been messaging me about this since either last Friday or Saturday. But this is the European. All right, so we're going to look at the surface, and I want to point out a couple of things here. Now, this is way out in the long range, but you see those yellow. Usually, by the time when you start looking beyond on the ensembles beyond 120 hours, it gets very smooth. It's just like you have one big high and one big low. But I do want to point out these yellow balls that you see here. So these are the ensemble members, and I had to go look at this, because you've got one here, Joe, one here, one here, and one here. Okay, in the Gulf of Mexico. So you got three off the southeast coast, and one in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the way I saw it as I moved it along, these three that are showing up represent one storm. It's just that the members are so far apart. But they're showing very deep pressures here, which is a little unusual. You don't see a 73 pressure on an ensemble map out 15 days. Okay, so this is a hurricane here, and this one that's closer to the Bahamas is also probably the same storm. And this one's got a 973 pressure off the southeast coast. So I'm thinking these three are all the same. The one in the Gulf of Mexico originates from something that forms off the Florida west coast, not too far from the Keys, and moves westward. And that could, so the ensembles seem to be suggesting that there may be two tropical cyclones at the same time going on, which does happen. But this is what the European has been doing, and I mean, I really don't have any insight other than to say what I usually say, which is, wait till we get into the short range and see what happens. The operational only goes out to 240 hours, so we can't really see what that does. But the European seems to be getting a little more bullish with the idea that there might be some tropical cyclone development later next week, for what it's worth.
Now, this is for we're talking about around the
so this
15th of August. This
is in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just point out is that when you look at the upper air, again, you're going to see a very smooth look, but here's your trough right in here somewhere, and then you've got a ridge, the western ridge and the Atlantic ridge, and all this in here, this is where your weakness is. So you could make an argument here that something that's off the southeast coast is going to make the turn around the Atlantic ridge to exploit that weakness. But again, this is at 2 weeks from now, this is a very smoothed out upper air. So who knows where the ridges exactly are and where the troughs exactly are. But I'm kind of interested in the fact that we still have this sort of perpetual weakness here in the eastern part of the United States. So it is something to. We've been saying this for weeks now. If this trough stays in the east when tropical cyclones start to develop, and if they get into the wrong position, there could be a problem for somebody. Well, I mean that's sort of stating the obvious, but this is what the long range models are telling us.
So we'll see. Again, if you start putting too much emphasis on products, put out like 10 or even 15 days out,
right?
Forget it. I mean, I actually tell people who come to me and they say, "Oh, did you see there's a big hurricane, such and such?" Let's say in this case it's Charleston, South Carolina, on the 384-day prog, 15-day. I say, when you see that, when you look that far ahead, more often than not, whatever you see, usually the opposite tends to happen. Very few cases where the models will pick up on something more than 10 days out and hold on to it for all of 10 or 12 days. So
if they do hold on to it, it always winds up being in some place other than where it shows it.
Right.
And not by a handful of miles either. We were talking hundreds of miles.
Yes.
Sometimes many hundreds of miles. All right, so I guess the real question for this week here in the East is going to be Thursday night and Friday. So, the GFS wants to generate some scattered thunderstorms Thursday evening. And then it looks like the front, like they've all been doing, the front approaches, it kind of gets hung up for an extra day and then suddenly fires up some thunderstorms on Friday. I'm wondering whether there might be some severe weather risk involved with this. I'm not it's not a half bad looking shortwave trough. The only thing is, I don't know that we have enough time to take dew points up above 70. I mean, I think they certainly could get to mid and upper 60s, but whether they get higher than that, um, it just not be. There may not be enough time.
Yeah. Well, again, we'll see. It might be similar to the kind of a situation we see in the spring. Let's say one of those April type systems that brings small hail and gusty winds, but in very in very what's the word I'm looking for? In I don't want to use the word restricted areas. Just in a few places you
All
get
right.
you get this crazy, these crazy storms, and elsewhere nothing happens or whatever. And you might see something like that with this next system at the end of the week. We'll see.
And here's your dew point relief behind it, which this time around, again, it gets down to about Maryland, maybe southern New Jersey, with 40 and 50, 40 dew points in all of New England, upstate New York, even as a 49 dew point Sunday morning in New York City or Saturday night during Saturday night. So this is the shot of dry air for the weekend, and then of course once that plays through after Sunday, we start to see the dew points. There it is for Monday afternoon. The dew points are back up above 70 in eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and it looks like the dew points stay high for a Wednesday. There's some kind of maybe little front because there's a little bit of dew point relief to the west. Maybe we've gotten these troughs that have gone by and actually have lowered the dew point just a little bit, so maybe that's what happens later next week. But overall, it's a warmer and more humid week next week that we're looking at in the eastern, particularly in the coastal Northeast, and certainly in the Mid Atlantic and South Atlantic states. And when we look at the radar presentation here on the GFS, we're seeing. I'm going to widen out to the U.S. because everybody wants to see both coasts, see the action that's happening over the weekend in the plains. But I'll back it up, and there's your high going out. There are going to be some showers and storms that are going to be moving out of the central plains and then down into the southeast, particularly for me, which makes me happy, so I don't have to water my plants. And here's your front for Friday. The models were showing a really vigorous system last week for this coming Friday, but now it's really sort of backed away from that idea. And
Yep.
then another dry, cool high for Saturday, and it looks like it wants to stay dry through the daytime Sunday. There is some kind of system that shoots out of the central plains and runs up toward Michigan, which on the prior run ran straight east into Virginia, which would have made, tried to have it rainy all day on Sunday. This model's backed away from that. And then we get some showers and storms on Monday, and then you can see during the week they pop up here and there in the more warmer and more humid air mass. I was going to really quick, I'll just put the European up because the European's been better on timing. It hasn't been better on much else, but it's been better on timing. Yeah, the European's a little more vigorous with the showers and storms for Thursday night and Friday. Produces a much more in the way of rain out of this, which was something I was thinking about with this next front. So I'm going to probably lean more in the European's direction, which means that there'll be some showers and storms on Friday as well. And then it looks like they're gone for Saturday, and it looks like they're not an issue for Sunday. Although you already see the next. Here's the next system for early next week, and then that moves eastward, and we get into some storms late Monday night, and then that goes by, and then there's something else on Wednesday, and then that goes by, and then we've come to the end of 240 hours. So there's nothing, we can only speculate openly about what the models are doing.
I
Okay.
could I could remember a week ago you're talking about this coming Friday that even the CPC folks, the Climate Prediction Center, on their 8 to 14-day outlooks were highlighting an area of possible excessive precipitation in the Northeast. And it's looking now at the mid and short-term models. Now, while there may be some precipitation, it certainly doesn't look like anything that to write home about. And it certainly doesn't look like an excessive amount of rainfall. So this is what I'm saying, folks. As you look out 10, 15 days at something that is threatening like a potential hurricane, when it finally comes around to that time frame, that time date, it may be either not even there or considerably weakened, or as Joe pointed out, if it's still there, it's in a totally different spot. So there you go.
And the system that the Hurricane Center has been watching for the last few days, and that's this beauty over here, which is completely disorganized. They've actually lowered the potential for tropical cyclone development from this. From 70% down to 50%, 40 and 50% in their 2 to 7 day outlooks. And this is something that would become a tropical storm for maybe about 15 minutes and then disappear in the open waters of the Atlantic. It's not a whole lot going on. I am seeing on the angle what looks like some stronger waves that may be getting ready to move off the African coast in a few days. They're marching westward at the moment. There is one that's out here south and west of the Cabo Verde Islands. You can see them here. Disorganized showers and thunderstorms there, but we don't see any signs of turning. Trying to see if I see, it doesn't look like there's a ton of shear. There's probably some northeast shear going on in the Caribbean. So that's that over there. And you've got strong southerly winds here in the Bahamas and points east, so that's going to preclude any kind of development going on here. And looks like there's strong northeast winds into the Gulf of Mexico. So we don't exactly have ideal conditions here for tropical cyclone development at the moment, but that could easily change over the next week. So we'll see what the models do with this. With the European ensemble, maybe it's on to something. I mean, eventually something has to get going, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be next week. But we'll see if the Europeans got the right idea, or if it's in one of its la la land modes.
We'll see.
You got Briller Jeopardy?
I do believe I do have Briller Jeopardy.
Well, then by all means, execute.
All righty. Let's. I'm just listening to my dog upstairs. The dog is. I feel bad for Renata because the dog is just barking its head off, and I have absolutely no clue why.
You mean like my dog is just sleeping here? Whenever I do the show, he just lays down in the bedroom and just doesn't, not a peep out of him.
You want to trade?
Well, he has his bursts of energy too, Joe. He's a little hard to handle sometimes, especially if there's squirrels outside.
I don't understand. We don't have very many squirrels this year here in Putnam Valley. I don't know where they went to, why we don't have them, but I've seen very few of them so far this season. All right, this looks like an interesting. This certainly looks like a very interesting Briller Jeopardy, Joe.
Yeah.
One that I think you are going to enjoy. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
On this Briller Jeopardy, we're going to discuss one of Mr. Cioffi's favorite shows, Dark Shadows.
Oh, good Lord. Now, speaking of which, yesterday on Turner Classic Movies, it's a very, very good movie. It's a little hard to watch because it's not exactly the most uplifting type of movie. It's called Night of the Iguana, which was written by Tennessee Williams. And anyway, dear Tennessee, he had such a great talent. But he in this movie we have Richard Burton, Deborah Kerr, Ava Gardner. I mean, these were the huge stars of the day. And Grayson Hall, who played Julia Hoffman on Dark Shadows. And Grayson Hall got she received a Best Supporting Actress nomination for both for the Oscars and the Golden Globe for the roles she played in this movie. And she was very good, by the way. So for you Dark Shadow fans who know who Grayson Hall is, who plays Dr. Julia Hoffman, if you see her in this movie, she'll her acting skills were great in this movie. She'll blow you away with how good her performance was. Anyway, I've said my piece. Go ahead.
Tom Contino says, Dark Shadows, don't these two watch anything modern? Now, I must tell you, Tom, I was not a big Dark Shadows fan. I rarely ever took a peek when it was on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on ABC Channel 7 here in New York, way back 50 plus years ago. But I know Joe was a Dark Shadows fan.
As most kids were. I mean, I was 10 years old when I started watching it.
Okay.
Oh, and Angelique was unbelievable. Oh,
so the first question,
what a beauty she was. Lara Parker. She watches the show, by the way, just so you know.
So for the first question tonight, how many years did the original show run?
Okay, so is this open to the chat board? Because it ran from 1966 to 1971. So
that's what?
66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 6 years and 1,226 episodes, I believe.
Oh God,
Did I ruin 2 questions at once?
You've already ruined 2 questions already. but now here's the thing: if you're making one of those years, like 1966, if that's inclusive, you said 66 to 71,
right? So I mean, if you looked at those 2 numbers, you might say 5 years. But the show did start in 1966, and it went off I think it was in June of 1966, and then it went off the air in April of 1971.
Okay, so Scott has 5 years here, but maybe he was looking at 66 to 71 for 5 years, but he didn't make 66, for example, a year inclusive.
Right.
Of that. So, yeah, it could have been 6 years instead of 5.
But I've given you the correct answer is what the bottom line is.
I assume you did.
Right.
How about this? True or false? Dark Shadows was the first ABC soap opera to be shot in color.
They went to color. The first soap opera to be shot in color
was the first ABC soap opera
shot in color. You know what? I don't know what the answer to that question is. I mean, I could say because that was around the time that networks were going from black and white, putting all their shows in color. I was reading about the fact that after Perry Mason's last season in 1966, the fall season of 66 to 67, that's when CBS was taking all its shows and putting them in color. I'll say true.
And you are correct. True. There are some people on the chat board who were talking about possibly General Hospital or maybe All My Children, but apparently Dark Shadows was the very first soap opera on ABC to be shot in living color.
Right, and All My Children didn't come until after Dark Shadows was off the air anyway, so.
So that makes sense.
Okay.
Number 3, how many films were spawned from Dark Shadows show?
How many films?
Yes.
All right, so from the original show, there was House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows. So there were 2. And then there was the sequel. Then there was the movie with Johnny Depp. So I don't know if you count that. So if you're talking about from the original series, there were 2 films. Then the Johnny Depp would have made the 3rd film, the 3rd movie. So the answer is either 2 or 3. So I'll say 3. I'll count the Johnny Depp one.
And you were correct. It was 3, according to the chairman.
And Chuck Cardillo and Miss Fowlerite also said 3. So they are correct as well.
All right, here's number 4. The Mansion of Collingwood Exteriors was filmed in what state?
Okay, so the original Mansion was filmed from it was a mansion, I believe, in Rhode Island. And then for the movie, And for the movie, they used the one that's in was it Lyndhurst up in near Poughkeepsie?
Well,
This
all he just says one state, and you're right. It was a New England state.
was
It was
Was it Rhode Island?
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, yeah. Yeah,
And
they.
finally, yeah.
In fact, the one that's up in the Hudson Valley, which they used as for the two movies they did, they do tours. The Dark Shadow conventions every year, and they do tours of that. I think it's called Lyndhurst.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
When we kicked off this question and answer session about 10 minutes ago with Dark Shadows, you included a part of the final question. Dark Shadows ran for 1,225 episodes.
Right.
In 2012, the whole series appears on DVD. And the question is, how many discs, how many DVDs
Oh
were in
my.
collection? And you'll get credit if you're within 35.
I mean, it's how many 30-minute shows can they fit on one DVD? Hold on, let's see. 1,226 divided by 12. I'm gonna say uh
And the question is, how many discs or how many DVDs were
all
in
right,
collection?
I'll give myself some room. I'll say 50.
Oh, too bad, Joe. You're not even within the 35.
Really? It was more than 85?
According to, get this now, according to Scott Briller, 131 discs.
Wow. Wow.
Can you imagine, like, just sitting there in your living room and just binge watching one after another after another
and how much it would have cost you, and the fact that you don't even have to do that anymore, because if you have Pluto TV or if you've got Freevee, which if you have Amazon Prime, you've got Freevee, you can watch whatever season or episode you want for nothing.
Wikipedia had 100, by the way, and Jason Schaefer had 200. Michael McGuire said 115. Wikipedia says I won by high prices right rules. Haha.
Tom Contino wants to know if I have any discs. I actually do, because I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, so I get every time the SAG Awards come out, I have to vote on the nominees. So I get all the films on DVD. I get all the movies that are nominated on DVDs. But I don't sell them. I don't, which would be illegal, and I don't lend them out because I pay union dues. So if you're a member of SAG-AFTRA, you pay your union dues, you get to vote, and you get to see the pictures.
There actually, I think I may have mentioned this once before on this show, that there was a situation back in 1969, a critical game between the Mets and the Cubs, where the Mets were mounting a rally in the bottom of the ninth at Shea Stadium, and the husband is watching the show. I guess they only had one TV in the house, and the woman at 4 o'clock came in and just arbitrarily switched to Dark Shadows, and a giant argument ensued. The husband switched back to the game. The woman switched back to Dark Shadows. And the bottom line of it is that the husband beat the wife literally to death. They found the wife later that day or the next day on her bed, dead. And the man went to jail for murdering his wife over the fact that she insisted on watching Dark Shadows, whereas he wanted to watch the Mets, which, by the way, they were down 3-1 in the bottom of the ninth, and they came back in an amazing comeback. They beat the Cubs that day 4-3. They scored 3 runs in the bottom of the ninth and won. But unfortunately, this gentleman, he may not even be alive anymore, but I think he may have spent the rest of his life because of Dark Shadows in jail. So,
well, he could have blamed it on the vampire.
I do remember from the story, not from the actual soap opera, but there was something going on with Angelique in that particular episode. and that's why she was insistent upon having to watch it. And the husband was just as insistent, saying, "I'm watching the Mets."
Oh, God, Angelique was some. Lara Parker was just. God, she was so the character she played was just so evil. I have this thing about I don't know. When I watch movies, I'm always drawn to evil women characters. The more evil they are, especially if they're like sadistic, evil of with great dialogue, very sharp dialogue and good lines where the lines hurt almost as much as the whatever she's using to commit her crime. I find them fascinating.
Donald Colgan, I give you credit. He identified the Met game. Donald Colgan must be a really big Met fan. Mets won that game 4-3. Kranepool base hit. Jenkins started that game. I'm amazed.
That's impressive.
Fergie Jenkins, who was a great pitcher, took a one-hitter into the ninth inning against the Mets, and everybody was figuring that's it, the game is over. And the Mets somehow came back and won the game 4-3. And Ed Kranepool, of all people, got the game-winning hit. But yeah, you're right. That was the game. That was the game, and the guy was wanting to see that game, and the wife wanted to see Dark Shadows. And anyway.
Tom Contino, if you spent less time watching Fox News, you'd know what the SAG Awards are. I'll put it that way. Which, and he said earlier on it, he was shocked that I didn't follow political news. No, that's not quite true. I do follow politics, but I read about politics. I don't watch the garbage. I don't watch the garbage that is spewed on Fox News, on MSNBC, and occasionally on other channels. I read The Hill. I read Politico. I read the Wall Street Journal. I occasionally
Do you read Atlantic?
I occasionally will read articles from the Atlantic and the Guardian and from the New York Times. But that's where I get my information. The only news-ish channel that I watch is CNBC because at the end of the day, everything is about money. So what better place to get information from about money than CNBC. So anyway,
one last thing before we leave. Tomorrow night, 8:30. Now again, tomorrow we're not going to be on.
Right.
At 8:30 tomorrow night from Wallops Island, Virginia, they are intending to launch an Antares rocket, supply rocket, to the International Space Station. And according to NASA, people within, let's say, a 500-mile range of Wallops Island may be able to see the launch. So if you were within 500 miles of Wallops Island and you know what direction to look for to see where Wallops Island is, you just might at around 8:30 tomorrow night see this rocket launch as it goes up on a path toward the International Space Station. And it looks like it's going to be clear, both down in the Delmarva area and also in the tri-state area. So if you're not doing anything around 8:30, step outside, take a look, and you might want to check NASA TV on the internet because they will give you an idea as to whether or not the rocket actually launches. If it does launch, you watch it on your NASA TV screen, and then you could step outside and look for it live and in color a minute or two later in your own backyard.
Well, and the half a dozen people that live on Wallops Island are regular watchers here of the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which, by the way, Joe, as you know, is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. You can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you decide to purchase this or anything else from their website, use the coupon code I want a weather station, and you will get
10%. Oh, that I didn't know. That was my cue.
Yes.
I was reading stuff off the chat board. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
10%,
10%
off.
And Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the phone number. Your go-to place if you got to get stuff just to make sure you can get through a tropical storm or hurricane should we see one this season. You can give them a call or you can go to their website, which is
omnitruevalue.com. And one last time, thank you very much to both Izzy D and Trish Sparaccio for hitting Super Chats tonight.
All right, so have a good day tomorrow, everybody. We'll see you back on Wednesday. By the way, I don't know if, I do put up, I do a weather in a minute video that I put up usually in the morning, and weather in 5, which I do in the afternoon, usually a few hours before this show comes on. I wait for the European run to be done just in case there's any kind of revelation from that I need to express publicly. So you can stay on top of the weather tomorrow by looking for that on my YouTube channel. So we'll see you Wednesday at 7:35 p.m. Nighty night.
Nighty night, folks.